Перше, пропозиція до всіх ЗМІ. Давайте одне ЗМІ, одне запитання, аби більша кількість змогла поставити свої запитання. Якщо це приймається, то я буду дуже вам вдячний, тоді ми зможемо більшу кількість запитань задати. Минулого разу нам вдалося 29 питань поставити, подивимося, скільки зараз вдасться. Друге, пропозиція також до всіх. Будемо працювати від 2 годин, ну подивимося, скільки нам вдасться, 2-2,5 години. А там далі вже як буде. Якщо у вас зараз є якісь запитання прямо до мене, які стосуються організації, то прошу. Ви будете піднімати таблички, я буду дивитися на ваші ЗМІ, буду надавати слово. Прохання бути лаконічними по можливості, аби ми встигли більше відповісти на більшу кількість запитань. Наперед прошу вибачення, якщо не встигнемо відповісти на чиїсь запитання, очевидно, будуть і такі. Прошу. Не будемо ігнорувати.
Все-таки постарайтесь сейчас сделать, чтобы там
Телебачення, гаразд.
Да, ви начнете.
Ну все, окремо скажу. І друге, президент почне з невеликого вступу, де зможе підсумувати рік, який минає, скаже кілька речей так само, а потім перейдемо одразу до запитань. Дякую всім за увагу.
Притом, там, скажем, у Игоря есть весь полный текст. Ну, Игорь там переводит, но переводит только для тех, кто там. А дальше?
А прислать сюда полный текст слабо было?
Ну, так слабо там было сделать интернет. Слабо все. Да. Ну, брусила, кто там переводит сейчас. Брусила же не будет. Вряд ли Торгоша. Торгоша. Да. А спроси Оленку, может они зашлют? Ну, не, уже не зашлют, уже не успеют. Ну, ладно, боже. В принципе, Порошенко напрямляется, все на то буду Ну, да?
Що ж говорити, йде тебе,
Да?
наверное, якийсь мікрофон твій включений на стрімі, тому що кажуть, що тут зачути, а у нас мікрофон не нажатий. Ну, да? Може, одну секундочку. Пока не можна. Можна буде.
Какой то? Этот выключен? А, тут есть микрофон.
Слушай, я тебе не перезвонила.
Так тогда нам этот не включать?
Сейчас, одну секундочку.
Раз.
Ну і що?
Раз. Все равно включен. Раз.
Мучитесь. Хай про настроєння.
Раз. Что? Нам главное, чтобы нам было что-то доброе. Нет, тут что-то.
Шановні пані та панове, президент України Петро
Ladies and
Порошенко.
gentlemen, the President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko.
Шановні журналісти, ми розпочинаємо нашу прес-конференцію.
Esteemed
Дякую, що вас сьогодні
journalists,
зібралося
we are
так багато,
starting our
близько
press
200.
conference. Thank
Буквально
you
3 особи
for
нам не вистачає до
coming
200.
here. There
Отже,
are
пропоную
about
такий
200
порядок, що
of
спочатку
them.
президент
We
зробить
basically
короткий вступ, а
need
потім ми
3
перейдемо
more to
безпосередньо
have exactly
до запитань.
200. First, the President
Мені
will
повідомили,
make
що
a
3
short
особи вже підійшли.
introduction and then we'll
Нас
proceed
уже
with the
200.
questions.
Я
I
хотів
was informed
подякувати
that 3
за
more
той
arrived,
інтерес,
so we have
який
200. I would
напередодні
like to thank
Нового року ви
for the
висловили
interest that
до цієї
on the eve
зустрічі.
of the
Мені
meeting
також буде
you
дуже цікаво
expressed
поспілкуватися
for
з
this
вами.
meeting.
Обіцяю, що вступне слово буде
It's
дуже коротким.
quite
Ми
interesting
зможемо
for me as well to talk to you. I promise
обмінятися
that the
думками,
introduction will be very
або
brief,
я
and we will
буду
be
давати
able to
максимально
exchange
щирі відповіді
ideas,
на ваші
or
запитання.
I will be providing maximum
Завершується
sincere answers to
2014
your
рік.
questions.
Рік, який безумовно є
2014
карколомним,
is almost over the year,
найбільш складним
which is
за останні 70 років після 1945 року. Найбільш складним для моєї країни, для України. І думаю, що дуже складний для Європи і світу в цілому. Світ став менш безпечним, менш передбачуваним. Була зруйнована глобальна повоєнна система безпеки, вона більше не працює. Ні, я не згоден з тим, що мір став біполярним. Мір залишається цивілізованим, і той факт, що весь світ об'єднався навколо України, весь світ продемонстрував дуже тверду єдність і солідарність з Україною, свідчить про те, що у нас є дуже серйозні підстави для оптимізму.
Risks which are in Ukraine starting from the beginning of 2014. They are amazing. It's like in a different life. Ukraine, which was immediately turned into dictatorship, into totalitarian state on the 16th of January 2014, the country where independence was just given and first time, but it had to pay a very, very high price for its independence for the second time, when 100 best Ukrainian guys and girls, irrespective of what nationality they were, irrespective of the citizens of what country they were, they gave their lives for the new country, for new nation to be born. The country where we have the threat of this sovereignty, and the country was threatened to be involved into the customs union, and it seemed to be irrevocable. The country where in March the real threat of territorial integrity was created after Crimea was annexed. Ukraine, the country where in the middle of the year the direct armed aggression of the neighboring country against our state started. The country where in the result of irresponsible financial policy had economic foundation destroyed in the beginning of the year. The list of risks and threats is big, and these are the risks and threats that Ukraine faced for the first time. The Liquidation Commission on liquidating the Ukrainian armed forces, the security service, the Ministry of the Interior forces was working. And some people hoped that we will not be able to defend ourselves, but I'm proud of how Ukraine lived this year. We did not just survive, we found an answer to all these challenges. One of the first steps after a very well conducted presidential elections. No one expected that in conditions of war, Ukrainian people will be so organized, so responsible to have the best presidential elections in the history of Ukraine. Immediately after that, the preparation to signing the association agreement with European Union started, and the agreement was signed on the 27th of June in Brussels. From the first days, we started implementing the measures to strengthen the defense capacity of our state. From the very beginning, the organizational structure was not ready to that. We had no money for that. But the military spirit, the unique volunteers movement, which basically negated the traditional proverb, my house is a side of everything. Yes, the house is a side, but we are on the front line of defending the state. More than 80% of Ukrainians in this or that form participated in the movement of volunteers. That's the country that a few years ago, where only 13% of Ukrainians were ready with arms in hands to protect their and defend their country. And in the beginning, the contribution of volunteers into the defense of Ukraine and its sovereignty and independence and territorial integrity was significant. We had no food in the warehouses of armed forces. We had no clothes. There were zero armored vests, zero helmets, just nothing. And the first strike of the enemy was met by the armed forces of Ukraine with the small arms, and there were just 6,000 military who were disseminated all over the country. But in a few months, Ukraine has created, and now I can tell it, one of the most military capable armies of the continent. And now we have people who come to us to examine our experience, to examine and learn on our operations, and to learn from our technology of fighting in the hybrid war. Within these 7 or 8 months, we managed to mobilize an unprecedented international support to Ukraine. For the first time in history, simultaneously on the 16th of September, the association agreement with European Union was ratified in the European Parliament in Strasbourg and in Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. There and here, that was the constitutional majority, which demonstrates the level of support that Ukraine has at all the international fora, including the General Assembly of the UN, where 100 countries supported the position of Ukraine and gave us significant support, which demonstrates the level of international respect that Ukraine enjoys. On the 26th of October, in very difficult situation with high risks, we had parliamentary elections. Many people were condemning me, were blaming me that I made the decision to dismiss the parliament and to announce early parliamentary elections, but the life demonstrated that that was the correct step. Now we do not have the fifth column in the parliament, we do not have the column of aggressor, we do not have communists who are traitors, we do not have the party of regions, and I do hope that we have a very good pro-European coalition which can take responsibility in these very difficult times. I also would like to say a few words about the law on lustration, which is another threshold which demonstrates radical changes which have to take place in the country. The positive end of the year, I do not want to talk long about all the achievements of Ukraine this year, but among them, liberating 150 hostages. That was not just liberating hostages, that was taking gradually. They were refusing to liberate them for half a year. Many of them received the sentence to be the death sentence, but these were the people from the National Guards, from volunteer battalions, who for many months were kept in captivity. And very active efforts and well-coordinated steps allowed 150 Ukrainian servicemen to spend the New Year holidays at home with families, and I'm very happy with that. Chongar is liberated. Ukrainian border guards moved forward, and they occupied the position together with Arabatsky Cape. They completely liberated territory of Khersonsky region, but we have very difficult tasks ahead of us. We can implement and do everything when we demonstrate unity and responsibility. Our mega task is reforms, creating all the conditions for economic growth in 2016, because now we have to stabilize the economy. We need to start new reforms which will ensure absolutely different position in investment climate. We need to make decisive steps in judicial reform, ensuring rule of law. We need to start effective actions in combating corruption, and this will help us convert this international respect that Ukraine enjoys into direct foreign investments, and that is what we need as heir. It will be very important at Riga summit in May 2015 to have a decision made on visa-free regime. We have all the components ready for that. We need to do that, and Ukrainians have to travel without visas all over Europe. And the main thing is, on the basis of my peaceful plan, on the basis of Minsk agreements, we need to turn this very fragile ceasefire which we have in the east into a sustainable peace. We need to return temporarily occupied territories under the control of Ukrainian authorities, to restore Ukrainian sovereignty on these territories. I would like to emphasize it again. This could be done only on the basis of Minsk agreement, which includes all the conditions needed to have it done, and the ceasefire regime, the immediate liberation of all the hostages. I emphasize all the hostages, because 150 are not all of them. The group which is set up, including the representatives of the security service, will continue their work looking for hostages on the occupied territories. The first four were brought back, and this will be done not in the regime of exchange, but will be just returning our guys back home. The key condition of Minsk agreement, which will bring peace to our country quickly, is very simple: to close the border and withdrawal of foreign troops from our territory. As soon as the foreign troops are withdrawn from our territory, there will be no conflict. It does not exist. And the first steps on liberated territories are a very good confirmation to that. They will go to Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Lysychansk, Severodonetsk, Mariupol, and people will see how we restore Ukrainian power on these territories. This will be another confirmation of the fact that the conflict which is brought into our country from outside, and who brought it, the aggressors, those who brought it here, the aggressors, they have to leave our country. That requires very serious international coordination. The activity which Ukrainian authorities, Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including Ukrainian President, demonstrated this year, will continue to do next year. My diplomatic year will start on the 15th of January in Astana, where we have agreed on the Normandy format meeting. Now the instructions are given to ministries of foreign affairs of the countries of Normandy format about drafting the agenda and draft resolutions to this summit. Another big challenge is combating corruption. In the nearest future, immediately after the holidays, on the 8th or 10th, there will be the meeting with the appointed three persons from the President government and the Parliament into the Council to Anti-Corruption Bureau. Several candidates give me serious grounds for optimism. All the corruption cases will be immediately given to Anti-Corruption Bureau, and using the best practices, the steps will be made to demonstrate that people who will have immunity will be able to really investigate in the corruption cases, and we will be able to show how efficient these steps are. A lot of work is ahead of us. A lot has been done already. The key thing is we need to preserve unity and responsibility. I'm sure that we will do that. And now let's move to questions. Esteemed colleagues, I see there are many journalists here. Let us start. STB. I'm Yulia Gonchar, STB channel. The question is complicated, but we will have to answer that. I don't know whether you drew attention to the exchange rate, but we have a dollar at 19 euro at 23 hryvnias, but it's not about dismissing Gontareva from the position of the governor of the National Bank, but in the state budget, the parliament, which the government passed, had a minimum salary of 2017 hryvnias. If we look at the currency, foreign currency, our minimum salary is less than 50 euro. It's just like 3 lunches in Europe, and it's in dollars, it's $63. So please, you are giving assessments. It's not a question. With big respect, this is with big respect, $64. It's 1,217 hryvnias. Will they have lunch in Ukraine or in Europe? But give us, quote the figures from Ukraine. Well, they will not go to the restaurant, but at the current exchange rate. Well, the question is not about how Ukrainians should go to Europe and eat in the restaurant, but how to survive having 1,217 hryvnias. And this is not the limit of this crisis. And the brief, very brief second question: when will you sell Russian and Channel 5 once you are talking about white salaries? Then maybe at the 5th channel people should get white salaries. I will not sell 5th channel, and I do not promise, I have not promised. Maybe the most truthful information is broadcast from Channel 5, and I'm sure that today, and the journalists will confirm that, that in 2003 the channel was an example of a very good information policy, but at STB and Novi channel there were different standards of the freedom of voice, but then we disseminated these standards to all free media so that we have such a format of communicating with the president. It's very comfortable. Channel 5 I will never sell. As to selling of Russian, immediately after I was elected the president, it was put to for sale by the Rothschild Bank, which is well known and legally now. I have no chance to influence it. I will not reveal any secret that in conditions of warfare, the investments do not come to Ukraine and no one can do anything. It is impossible to sell anything at that time. And I know that there were 4 attempts, but that's delayed, but the key condition is to stop the war. And one more thing. If this is not completed in the nearest future, I will have, because there are no buyers, I will have to buy, to sell it to the management, because there's no other way. This will be done transparently and efficiently. But the last 7 months would demonstrate that there is a difference between, I separate my activity and contacts with Roshan. That's done publicly and that's confirmed by the people with which are world famous. As to how to survive at 1,217 grivnas, I'm sure that you will not be able to survive in Europe for this money. Here it's also very difficult. One thing we can do is not to have anyone living for this minimum salary, and that is why yesterday the parliament passed, to my understanding, they made a very courageous step. They decreased the single social contribution, which now will create conditions for taking out of the shadow the economy. When instead of 41%, 16.5% will be paid a single contribution on condition that your minimum, the salary from which you pay will be more than 3,000. This will be 14% lower than last year, and I believe that's a sufficient step for the whole of economy to bring the salaries out of the shadow and to stimulate the economy, because actually we'll be able to pay much more salaries with the same tax burden, and I believe this will work. And one more thing. Immediately when the peace is, immediately when we have rule of law and when we start fighting corruption, we will set up the entrepreneurship initiative which will be able to sell white and high salaries so that Ukrainians can travel anywhere visa-free to Europe, so that the exchange rate of 17, 18, 19, it does not reflect the real situation of the correlation between the salary and the income and expenditures. The panic has to be stopped. And you know when it will be stopped? Immediately after the agreement is signed, when we have additional resources, and then investors will believe more into our country. And what will help it? The package of legislation and the budget, which yesterday was passed in the parliament in conditions of very, very fierce discussion, when both sides hear each other, both the government and the parliamentary coalition. which formed the government. So I disagree with your assessment that someone made them do it, just vice versa. You know why? Because we had already, if we want international financial institutions to come here to cooperate with us, then today we had to give them the macro indicators of the approved budget so that they get prepared to their mission. If someone wanted to delay it and to talk for another week or two, that's great. But from the 1st of January, physically, we wouldn't have money to finance the army, and the army would be without money because there were no money in there. And I believe that the behavior of those who voted for the budget was the behavior of very responsible people, and I believe that we all should give objective information to everyone. The next question, Liga Business Informing.
Are you happy with the work of our judiciary, of our prosecution, and there were no cases, and Azarov is selling his house in downtown. Thank you very much. First of all, it's not my general prosecutor, but general prosecutor of Ukraine. Secondly, I am not happy, not the work of the general prosecutor, but of the general prosecution. Thirdly, first of all, it's not my general prosecutor. I'm sure that the steps as to corruption fight in 6 months should be much bigger. But we have to understand clearly that the first time in the history of Ukraine, criminal cases arrested leaders, heads of traditional objects of corruption for that existed for 23 years in Ukraine. Ukrainian railroads, energy companies, Ukrainian mail, Ukrainian alcohol, and other companies where there was stealing, and they stole billions of hryvnia, and they will, if they are brought they will be brought to the court. That has never been done in Ukraine before. I am not trying to justify anyone, but secondly, I'm not happy with the investigation of cases related to those killed on Maidan. But we have to take into consideration two components. The first one, on the 26th of March, on February, the parliament passed the law on amnesty. By whom? For those who were on Maidan, on the other side, on anti-Maidan, and we should bring to responsibility all who are responsible for deaths on Maidan. Those judges who let free those murderers should be sentenced together with those who murdered people. And there are 3 judges. They are prohibited to work, and they should be brought to responsibility. This is also something that has never happened before. What was done for that? We set up, create a State Bureau of Investigation. All the cases are sent for investigation. Why? Because we approved at my initiative a new law on the prosecution, and the prosecution will have nothing to do with that. According to the new law, it will have only 2 functions, monitoring and representation in courts. That's it. And new structures with absolutely new or not engaged investigator must demonstrate their efficiency. In addition to that, prosecution. In the parliament, my team prepared a draft law which provides that we destroy this old system of of prosecution, because it says that those can work in prosecution who have experience of 5 or 10 years. Well, in that environment, I'm thankful to the Parliament that supported my initiative, destroyed that case, and now the General Prosecutor has a chance to hire to the General Prosecution new, not engaged lawyers, experienced, young, who will improve the situation, or will have a chance to improve the situation. I have no doubt that we have problems, and these problems are everywhere, and these are problems of all of us. Thank you. I would like to give floor to the Associated Press. Are you planning to hold a referendum on NATO membership next year? Thank you. I am planning now, during the press conference, to sign a law which is called the Law on Amendments to non-block status, and more than constitutional majority voted for that. The law that was brought to the Parliament by the President of Ukraine, and it was supported by the Parliament. Secondly, I am planning to reform the country, to reform in such a way that it would work according to European standards and standards of NATO. I can tell you that those standards are important for us. And when we meet those criteria, it's quite possible it will be done in the framework of Strategy 2020 during the common 5-6 years. Then people of Ukraine decide on NATO membership. Thank you. Day newspaper. I sign this law, and I think that was a strategic mistake in 2010 when Ukraine got the status of non-block status and destroyed its own military forces. Good afternoon. Ala Dubrovik, editor of Economics Department in the Day newspaper. I would like to ask the question. Experts have an idea. If the president fails to sell his business, we understand the reasons you named. Give profits from that business to the pension fund of Ukraine. That would improve the situation with the pension fund. Thank you. I have a question also. As to Russian cooperation, there are questions that under the conditions of war with the Russian Federation, the cooperation didn't lose its share on the Russian market. And the world demands of us to decide whether we are fighting or are you selling, making business. That's the question we hear from international experts. Mr. President, the issue of sanctions Ukraine can introduce against Russia is in the field of responsibility of the Security and Defense Council. You, as the chair of that, tell us why Ukraine doesn't introduce sanctions against Russian banks, for example, in Ukraine, etc. And if you consider that issue, when that meeting of Security Defense Council can take place, that will deal with that issue. Ask the question about Russian to Russian, and you will get all the answers. Because on one hand, you ask the question and you understand that I have nothing to do with it. On the other hand, you are trying to ask the question about it. My answer would be I don't know about the volume of, about the share of Russian and Russian Federation, but I can tell you that at present Sales in Russian, there are almost no sales in Russian Federation. If you don't know about that, I can tell you that in 2013, for Roshan exclusively, it was prohibited to provide products to Russian Federation. And still that prohibition is in force. And Roshan on Russian market, even if it wanted, they don't have a chance to work. There was a prohibition in 2013, and accounts of Russian were frozen, and the enterprises were not able to work, and that arrest is still in force. And you can easily get that information from Russian company, not waiting for information from the president. And also you can find out everything about the pension fund, because Roshan is trying to invest all its profit into new jobs in Ukraine. And I think it's a very responsible position. As to the rest, to take, add, and divide, it's to Sharikov. That character Sharikov from the novel of Bulgakov, Dog's Heart. Now about the Council of Defense and Security. If you don't know, Russia is under Ukrainian sanctions. Supplies to Russia hundreds of enterprises of Ukraine defense industry, machine building, military goods are prohibited by the decision of the National Defense and Security Council. All positions. Sanctions are adequate, or there will be. And in Europe, they have not prohibited Russian banks. They prohibit to finance them. I can promise that we'll introduce sanctions, and we coordinate sanctions with other countries, and nobody will have that question anymore. Berg. I have a question about your colleagues. There was a question about Yerema. I would like to ask about Mr. Halitei, who was played some role in Ilovaisk siege. And we forgot about him after he was dismissed from the position of the Minister of Defense. He became the chief of State Security Service. Usually, for such a situation in Ilovaisk, it was strange to see him on that position. There's nothing personal, but there should be answers for that question. And I support the question of my colleague. Of course, Mr. Yerema does a lot. But it's not the issue of friends. And we'll not cover all the issues of the prosecution, but you understand, as long as we don't have honest political answers to our questions, nobody will trust you. I don't think about the second term on this position, honestly. The last thing I am thinking about the friends of Yerema. I'm also waiting for Yerema to put some of his friends to sentence some of his friends. When I advised him to sentence 3 of his friends disappeared. Now he is trying to find friends. So I also demand to bring to responsibility not only those who gave criminal orders. Now there will be a special investigation bureau. There will be improved coordination between prosecution and this investigation bureau. If I don't receive that report to the State Bureau of Investigation, there will be political conclusions. Everything is easy. Now about Galatei. General prosecution responsibility or functional responsibility of the Minister of Defense to plan military operations, and he's not responsible for that. I'm completely happy with Galatei as how he does his work and for his responsibility. And many attacks were prevented around this administration, 7, and he participated in that directly, and also his colleagues. So I'm happy with his. How as to Ilovaisk, nobody forgets about Ilovaisk, as somebody believes. And for Ilovaisk, some people already, hundreds are punished. On August 25, when on our territory, absolutely rudely, ferociously, there was a Russian Federation, Russian murders without any reserve. They were destroyed. And on September 3, there was intrusion of Russia Federation. Brigade 79 and Colonel General Muzhenko Ilovaisk, and our shells and hundreds of murderers, they are still there. It's a war, and there are such events in the war. And that raid and hundreds of murderers, they are still here, and there is a result of operations of Ukrainian armed forces under the circumstances.
I can say that this year, well, you said that on the 15th of January there will be the meeting in Astana. Who will participate in these meetings? One of the biggest results in this situation. When can you expect next negotiations in Minsk format? Thank you for the professional question. I would like to emphasize there's no other format instead of Minsk. The Minsk format, I would like to remind you, the Ukraine and Russia, between Ukraine and Russia on the implementation of the peace plan of Poroshenko. There are 12 items there which envisage the military economic development, and we demand that Minsk format is continued. As to withdrawal of forces, as to the ceasefire and silence, as to continuation of liberating the hostages, so that the Minsk format continues in Minsk. But talking about fake elections on the 2nd of November, we are talking about legal elections according to Ukrainian legislation, so that the conditions are created to liberate the hostages, and so that the Ukrainian territory remains Ukrainian territory. Everything's in the Minsk agreement. we need to create legitimate conditions. Ukraine will never so basically, we cannot allow review of Minsk agreements. And not just the European Union, the US, Japan, the whole world, Australia, Canada, they were expressing their support. There is the preliminary agreement most probably this will be on the 15th of January, and the ministers of foreign affairs with participation of the Chancellor of Germany, Merkel. But this is not the only format. On the 15th of January, as I said, with the participation, well, I discussed that with Barack Obama and new leadership of the European Union. But this is not the only format. And the way is very simple. One thing that we are requesting we have to ensure the progress in implementing Minsk agreements. The way is very simple. The one thing we are requesting we have another progress.
Доставивши українські гуманітарні вантажі в школи-інтернат, ще у нас є дуже значний прогрес. Вона спочатку ми не передаємо комусь вантажі, не маючи контролю над тим, кому і як вони будуть поставлені. Це для нас було питання. Доставивши українські гуманітарні вантажі в школи-інтернат, адміністрації Луганської регіональної населення забезпечити цей перший проєкт, також є ознакою, що мінські домовленості потроху починають, кому і як вони будуть поставлені. Це для нас було питання адміністрації готелів, коли ти можеш вибрати це, не брати це. Ми наполягаємо, що всі 12 пунктів симптомів обов'язково мінські домовленості потроху починають. Minsk agreements gradually. The channel. The government of our country put them in very inconvenient situation. All the citizens of Crimea, non-residents. Низка помилок.
that is not creating some round tables. We have the key position political. Yeah, то ж саме.
підпадали під юрисдикцію цього закону. І ще важливо, колись ви обіцяли безпечному реалізаційному пакету реформ на такої зустрічі для РФ власне не було, це була більш широке коло. Вам би експерти позицію всього експертного товариства, позицію щодо цифрової реформи, позицію щодо суспільного плану. Будь ласка, прийміть реанімаційний пакет реформ і знову будь ласка, дуже прошу.
Дуже дякую вам. Я проінформований. Декілька разів включався інших напрямків, де працювати щодо судової реформи, щодо антикорупційної реформи, економічної реформи, вони будуть імплементовані в механізм стратегії 2020. Перше. Друге. Колектив організований продукції, щодо програм. Третє. Я наголошую, що колишні положень не влаштовує міжнародні організації, бо в умовах отримання українськими фінансової допомоги вони викладають своє бачення, з яким я згідний, щодо ефективності функціонування антикорупційного бюро. Тепер я не готовий відповідати вам і щодо наявності представникам всіх правоохоронних органів. Але ключове слово у вас є слово «майже». Якщо там є люди, які готові працювати, якщо будуть вони визнані експертами, як ті, що мають бездоганну репутацію, ви поточною редакцією закриваєте для них цю можливість? Ви би закрили. Давайте ми тоді дамо можливість депутатам, експертам визначитись. Бо фактично я дуже великі надії покладаю на антикорупційне бюро. І щоб потім там у нас не було просто великих розчарувань. Бо нам там потрібні реальні професіонали. І якщо ми бачимо, що у нас сьогодні в країні ми створимо атмосферу, що у нас взагалі немає жодної людини, які там могли би працювати в ньому, і ми би закрили для них, то у нас буде просто дуже великий час, поки люди навчаться. Давайте спробуємо знайти оптимальний підхід, і це точно буде робити не президент. Це мають робити законодавчий орган і ключова.
Ладно, уже все перестало.
Збройних сил вважаєте за доцільне його введення? Дякую.
Дуже дякую, Оксана, за запитання. Два останніх засідання Ради національної безпеки і оборони були присвячені тому, що готується спеціальний сценарій переведення економіки на військові рейки, уточнення функцій місцевої влади для функціонування в особливий період і чіткий план, що будемо робити в випадку, якщо відбудеться вихід з мирного процесу і розв'язання продовження штатного агресії. Можу вам обіцяти, що військове положення буде подано. Зараз ніщо нас не стримано для того, щоб у нас підготовлені плани, підготовлені завдання для кожного керівника, для кожного міністра, для кожного це Рада національної безпеки і оборони. Всі правоустановлюючі документи про створення ставки Верховної є. Просили, щоб бюджет був прийнятий, бо ми вважаємо, що ризики саме зараз залишаються достатньо високими, і і відновлення боєздатності української армії зараз є моїм першим пріоритетом. Пані Оксана, я завтра їду до Львова. Ми будемо передавати більше 100 одиниць техніки, 100 бригад, артилерійський десант. Після цього одразу після зльоту я буду в Житомирі, де буде передаватися також центру біля 100 одиниць бронетехніки. Після цього я буду в Харківській області ще через 10 днів, де теж більше 100 одиниць бронетехніки будуть передаватися. І це нещодавно я був в Чугуєві, ви пам'ятаєте, на День Збройних сил в грудні місяці теж ми передавали. Уявіть собі, це вже ті результати того процесу, який...
I have recently been to Chuguyev, you remember, in December. Just imagine, these are the results of the process which myself and my team started for us to have an efficient armed forces. We have the high accuracy weapon, we have radars, we have drones, we have special systems, and we are actively restoring our armed forces. Do we want war? No, no one wants it. Do we want the citizens of Donbass not to celebrate the New Year in the bomb shelters, anti-bomb shelters? We need a single united people and powerful international support, and that will speed up the processes. At the same time, I have to defend my country from the activities of subversive groups and reconnaissance groups which are trying to get to this part of the Ukrainian territory, and that is why we enhance the security measures, we enhance the regime of control, we introduce absolutely new regime of movement, and many things are done which I cannot tell you about, but which will make the elements of our defense much more powerful. Also, a lot of attention is paid to bringing to order everything inside these territories, to stop the flow of weapons that come from the enemy's territory, to stop the activities of marauders. Our security service is able to do that. The press.
Я вас вітаю. Ви знаєте, ви правильно сказали про те, що треба демонструвати єдність. Всі допомогли. Ми б терпіли, як
I would like to welcome you.
російській пропаганді. Ми терпіли, коли ви провели свого сина по мажоритарці в Верховну Раду. Ми терпіли, коли ви через Верховну Раду провели рішення щодо створення посади під свого кума, під неіснуюче і непотрібне міністерство, воно досі не існує. Ми терпіли загравання з терористами з приводу продажу вугілля і всього іншого. Ми терпіли режим припинення вогню, під час якого щодня безкарно відстрілюється по кілька наших а вони відстрілюють наших патріотів. Навіть якщо вони їх ранять, то вони їх виводять.
Have been patient for a long time. We have been patient.
Військовий стан, про воєнний стан. Хотілося б зрозуміти, якщо ви сказали, що у нас найбільш боєздатна армія, а за час цього перемир'я 203 людини вже загинули. Як ви збираєтеся відповідати перед родичами загиблих після встановлення вашого режиму припинення вогню? Якщо у нас боєздатна армія, коли будемо наступати і коли буде оголошено військовий стан? Дякую.
Я почну з останнього. Воєнний, а не військовий стан буде оголошений, як тільки будуть розв'язані бойові дії. Пані Оксана, воєнного вирішення питання по Донбасу не існує. Хто хоче побавитись, зброю в руки і під кулі російської військової машини, найбільш сильної військової машини на континенті. Побачите, чим це закінчиться. Сотні українських героїв гинуть за день. Тоді, коли було вторгнення. Існує виключно політичне рішення конфлікту на Донбасі. Так зверхньо, знаєте, сказати, що давайте пішли в наступ, для мене дуже болить. І я дуже відповідально ставлюся до життя кожного українського солдата. З 9 грудня, пані Оксано, коли запроваджений режим антитерористської тиші від обстрілів, підкреслюю, від обстрілів, не загинув жодний солдат. Да, ми втрачаємо наших воїнів, які гинуть на розтяжках, в тому числі наших. Ми втрачаємо від зіткнень з диверсійно-розвідувальними групами. Режим припинення вогню працює. І не гинуть українські воїни. Воєнний стан буде введений негайно. Моїм указом, рішенням Ради нацбезпеки і оборони будуть передані до Верховної Ради, як тільки відбудуться перші наступальні операції від лінії зіткнення. Ніхто не буде коливатися жодної хвилини. Я наголошую на тому, що працює не тільки режим тиші, але й мирний план. І наводив вам конкретні аргументи. За час дії мирного плану, пані Оксано, звільнено 1500 українських полонених. 1500. В тому числі 150 на останньому тижні. Не було б миру, я невідомо, залишились ці люди живими. Плану. Загравання, як ви називаєте, з ЛНР, ДНР, у нас на сьогоднішній день ніякого не існує. Навпаки, за моїм наказом припинена контрабанда вугіллям, яка йшла через лінію зіткнення. Зупинені. Зараз готується законодавча база для конфіскації подібних вантажів. Єдиний вантаж, який зараз є, це є або вугілля з державних підприємств, які мають постачати вугілля на українські електростанції, з контролем, що кошти використовуються виключно як заробітна плата українським громадянам-шахтарям, які там працюють. Ми здатні це проконтролювати. Інші підприємства, які працюють, ще раз скажу, вони мають бути перереєстровані на території України і сплачувати податки на території України і отримати зарплату, бо це теж українські громадяни. Якщо ви це вважаєте заграванням, ми з вами по-різному бачимо, ви маєте на це право. Але я президент країни і буду реалізовувати своє бачення. Більше того, воно знаходить підтримку на сьогоднішній день більшості українців. Щодо мого сина. Мій син пройшов по мажоритарці як самостійний політик, набрав одну з найбільших кількість голосів на мажоритарному окрузі і має право втрити. А у вас є право оцінювати його дії як політика в вільній і демократичній країні. В тому числі задавати такі питання на президента. А в мене є обов'язок на них відповідати. Я вважаю, що це теж ознака демократичної країни, за яку я борюся. Президент не створює міністерств. Але я наголошую на тому, що в умовах інформаційної війни, про яку ви говорили, що ми маємо бути єдиними, має бути і ефективна контрпропагандистська політика, в тому числі і на окупованих територіях, яка зараз не ведеться. Мають бути спеціальні програми для наших військових, мають бути спеціальні програми для окупованих територій, мають бути спеціальні заходи, публічні і непублічні, які дозволяють нам перемогти в інформаційній війні. Я дуже розраховую на співпрацю із вами, пані Оксано, і на співпрацю з Українською правдою, яка є потужним інформаційним ресурсом. Дякую.
Прошу запитання Інтерфакс.
Доброго дня, пане президент.
Вітаю вас.
Інтерфакс України, Оксана Гронтів. В мене питання стосовно ситуації на Донбасі. Наразі вона складається так, що існують великі ризики заморожування конфлікту, і деякі експерти вважають, що це може бути довгострокова така стратегія Росії. Які кроки можуть бути прийняті для того, щоб унеможливити це? І друге питання стосовно затвердження лінії розмежування. Дякую.
Лінія розмежування, вона є в Мінському меморандумі. Інша справа, що на сьогоднішній день бойовики борються за те, щоб її не визнавати. Наша позиція абсолютно чітка. Ще раз кажу, це не є ні в якому разі кордон, це все українська територія. Це є елемент мирного процесу, для того, щоб ні в кого не створювалися спокуси щодо проведення наступальних дій. До речі, я забув відповісти вам щодо того, що нібито українська армія позбавлена можливості вести вогонь у відповідь. Це брехня. Бо на сьогоднішній день кожен, хто є об'єктом атаки, має право відкривати вогонь у відповідь. Це було з самого першого дня демонстрація запровадження режиму припинення вогню. І просто не вірте цій брехні. Якщо безпосередньо ведеться вогонь по позиціям українських військ, а не провокаційний в повітря, як зараз це робиться, українські війська завжди мають можливість відповідати на вогонь. Приклад кіборгів в Донецькому аеропорті. Хто їм забороняє вести вогонь? Як тільки на них йдуть наступ, вони надзвичайно ефективно дають у відповідь. Де ви берете ці дані? Ви ж... Тому для мене позиція абсолютно одна. От подивіться, як воюють українські кіборги в аеропорту, і переконаєтесь в тому, що жодних правових обмежень щодо захисту позицій не існує. Тепер щодо заморожування конфлікту. Дійсно, цей ризик існує. І ми робимо все можливе, щоб його не допустити. Ми робимо можливість для того, щоб боротися за...
We're creating the opportunity so that we get all the citizens who are not supporters of separatists. 70% of those who live in Donbass want to stay in Ukraine, and we are helping them via the humanitarian assistance, information policy, military policy. If today there are no Ukrainian authorities there, that means there's no Ukrainian funding there, and the militants cannot ensure any administration in this territory. The enterprises are not operating there. There are no social payments. The only thing they count for is to get funding from Russia and cargoes from Russia. But that's not Transnistria, that's not Ossetia. These are 4 million people who live in a very complicated area. As soon as the borders closed, there will be no reason for having the conflict there. We have set up the headquarters, and the agenda of the headquarters is not to allow freezing the conflict. Looking at the moods there, we believe there's no threat of having a frozen conflict there. In the morning in Piski, the militants started offending. Now the tanks are going there. There are 3 persons killed. That's the question from the servicemen. Will assistance be provided? And as to Donetsk airport, despite the fact that we went there, that we agreed to the agreement to have rotation in Donetsk airport with the live news cameras there, but our servicemen are just watching how the militants are regrouping themselves. We could act in advance. First of all, When I was leaving for the press conference, I had no information about people killed. Before the press conference is over, I will either confirm or deny this information. In Pisky, we have enough artillery and tanks not to allow any breakthrough. I would like to emphasize that. And our Kyborgs are equipped with the newest anti-tank weaponry, and I have no doubts they have. I have no doubt in the fact that they can defend themselves. And again, there's no limitation as to firing back or stopping any operations when there is an attempt to encircle or to change the status there. And there will be a very decisive actions taken in reply. We need to ensure that the ceasefire regime is observed there in Donetsk, on the territory, near the territory of the airport. The representatives of OSCE are working. Every shot is controlled by the representatives of OSCE, and the people can are trying to ensure the ceasefire regime is observed. And we are now working on how to supply food products and other products not via the controlled by terrorist territory. There is a plan that can be implemented, the peace plan, which is ceasefire, ensuring stable truce and political dialogue, and there's a military plan, and the military plan is offense. Today, I cannot tell you what's the proportion of Ukrainian armed forces in comparison to Russian armed forces, but I can tell you one thing. We do not have enough forces to start offense. I am the commander-in-chief, and I believe I have more information than any of your friends. Just believe me, the information on the numbers of armed forces is not public, but we know exactly the number of Russian servicemen, equipment, armaments, weaponry, the numbers of militants, the places of their location. And we cannot have too light attitude to that. These are combat actions in the city. Donetsk airport is on the territory of the city, and the number of killed civilians 17 times is higher than the number of killed servicemen. Which commanders are suggesting to start military actions in the city of Donetsk? 1+1. Good afternoon. I would like to go back to the beginning of your presentation. The problems probably started because the authorities were not punished, and that was started when our colleague Georgi Gangadze was killed. 15 years passed since the time of that killing. Now the case of General Pukac is considered by the court in the closed mode, and we would like to know your position. Should this process be open, made public, because that was expressed by Nalivaychenko and Lutsenko, but still the process is closed? And also, what do you think about whether those who ordered this murder will be made, whether they should be made in the murders of the journalists, and if they are named, will that change the system when the authorities believe that the winners will not be judged and they are never punished. You are asking questions, the answer to which is obvious. Who's against the open process? There's no one against. Who's against naming those who ordered the killings? I am not against the first one or the second one, but you know what I am against? The name of Georgi Gangadze is sacred for me. I worked with him, and I don't want someone to use this murder of Georgi as an element in some disputes which have nothing to do with the objective investigation of Gangadze case. And I believe you and myself, we understand what we are talking about. Insider. I have a question on the situation in energy sector. We all know that now there's a need to import electricity, and there's information that the intermediary may become a Russian businessman, Grigoryshin. Which publication you're from? Insider. So you stated that there will be no intermediary. We know about the scandal around the coal from Southern African Republic, and in which your administration was involved. Can you make any steps so that all the intergovernmental contracts in energy sector are legitimized, are legitimate? Don't look for a black cat in the dark room. Yesterday that I gave instructions to the Minister of Energy to execute direct agreements without any intermediaries, and yesterday that contract was executed, and starting from 12 p.m. We are receiving the electricity, and that allowed us, again, that's according to the Minister of Energy, to reduce the capacity of coal-powered units, and the embargo that existed for a month was levied when the coal that was purchased by Ukraine was not supplied to Ukraine. Second, that was the first agreement on the so-called zero flow. But in the nearest days, there will be an agreement signed between two state-owned companies, the state-owned company of Russia and Ukraine. I know that the rumor was launched that about that situation. Follow that. Please inform. But not just here, but in other sectors. Aren't you interested to investigate the case with South African coal? Look at the difference in price, look at the difference in quality, look at whether it was the type that could be used in our power plants, look at how much was trying to earn on that. My administration wasn't involved into that. One thing is that at the meeting of the National Security and Defense Council, I requested to pay attention to the energy sector. When the new government came, they found out that there's no coal, there are no reserves. What was purchased, it does not burn, but I will not interfere into the investigation, because we can blame the person who's innocent. My position is, well, I am satisfied with the fact. I hope that the unit which will be restarted at Zaporizhzhia power plant, when the second unit at Khmelnytskaya and the third at Yuzhno-Ukrainskaya power plant will be launched, This gives me a lot of hope that Ukrainians will have light in the new year. Someone was blocking execution of this contract. So this is something for you to investigate. In what am I different from you? Because every word of mine is the word, the information that was verified. You have different versions. You can investigate.
Пане президенте, от з п'ятниці світові ЗМІ пишуть про блокаду Криму і такий термін вживають острів Крим. Скажіть, будь ласка, чи це дійсно блокада з українського боку?
International media write about island blocking Crimea, and is it used with in negotiations with Russian Federation? Can we expect that food will be prohibited from food supplies will be prohibited to Crimea?
Намагаємося знайти відповідь на запитання, яке було поставлено. Прошу ще раз BBC, будь ласка, озвучте.
BBC, once again, could you ask your question? Could you repeat your question? Blocking Crimea. Do you use that in negotiations? First of all, we are not blocking Crimea. There are measures which provide protection of Ukraine from infiltration groups. Until now, it was unacceptable under terrorist threat when it was that trains and buses are not monitored. They were traveling back and forth and will bring in even those, including those people who are threat for Ukrainian state. Now we work on this issue, how to fix this issue, how to monitor those means of transportation. As far as I know, there is a decision to allow light vehicles only because it's very easy to monitor them and check on security. We are not going to use blockade, and also we're not going to use it as a too low pressure, but we'll do everything possible to defend peace of Ukrainian citizens, including from terrorist threats. That's why the level of intensity of monitoring on some regions in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and also on the line between mainland and Crimea, it will be provided. And there will be higher security requirements, especially around these vacations and holidays. We received information about threats, and this position, I think, is clear and supported not only by Ukraine, not only by international community, but also by Ukrainian citizens. There was a journalist who asked me about the Donetsk airport. Yes, the battle got over 10 minutes ago. Militants moved back. So the attack was fought off by Ukrainian armed forces. There were some militants. Donetsk airport is under complete control, and that's what will happen. Unfortunately, the information about 3 deaths is confirmed. Militants lost 14. One of them was arrested. It's true, but it's the war. And Donetsk airport is a symbol of bravery of Ukrainian servicemen and the efficiency of Ukrainian armed forces. Thank you. Телекритика.
Пане президенте, Світлана Остапа, телекритика. Ви розумієте, що без
Mr. President, Svetlana Ostapa, Telecritica, you understand that without reforms in Ukraine, Ukraine will not become an independent state. In introduction of public broadcasting, that is one of the key reforms, thanks to which we could have a real Ukraine democratic and independent. previous presidents promised to us that they would introduce public broadcasting. They failed. When you became the president, the law on public broadcasting was approved, but because it's not perfect, they cannot use it. Now, in the parliament, they registered the draft law, which was developed by media lawyers and by the Committee on Freedom of Speech and Information, which will allow to build public broadcasting independent. But we have information that your administration is blocking that draft law. Who? When? Who and how? No, tell me now. Name me. Let me. You have an advisor on humanitarian issues, Mykola Tomenko, who registered his draft law. But that draft law, he's the head of the committee. He's an MP. He's not working for the administration of the president. And he has a right, I don't know which draft law he registered, but as an MP, he has a right. As the former head of the Committee on Freedom of Speech, he can register any draft law. It doesn't mean that the administration of the president is blocking public broadcasting. You will not see any step from the administration of the president for blocking public broadcasting, because I support this idea. When you say in your presentation, in your administration, somebody's blocking, nobody's doing that and will never do that. And the position of an MP, that is a position of an MP. Please respect it. There is a position. It's his from your faction. Do you want to go to the history of Ukraine? Who will help with this issue? I agree to support. I will support public broadcasting, and I believe that I did something for freedom of speech in this country. It must be independent. We have, I don't know how we can define that level of maximum independence. You ask the question, listen to the answer. I'm interested that Ukraine has public broadcasting, and I'm interested in its efficiency. It should work for the society, for the country. That's it. We don't want it to be like in Russia. And I don't want it to be like in Russia. Speak to Tomenko, MP Tomenko. He is an MP. He just registered a draft law. It's his right. It's his right to start a discussion. And you believe that I, as a president, I should press on the deputy, and you want that I should demand him to call back his draft law, and you believe that this is democracy. I'm surprised to hear that from you. It's not democracy. In my faction, there are different deputies. Okay, let me call Tomenko for him not to give it. Let me call Leshchenko for him not to write on in Facebook, and let me call Nayem and ask him not to do something else. Do you want this? Bravo. I would like to find out about coal. In the cost of water, we are able to unblock coal supplies from Russia, and how this issue will be solved. Will Ukraine procure coal from DNR or LNR, or will we procure power, electric energy? That's a question to the Minister of Energy. I'm not going to go that deep. What will happen? I know that at present we can take that electric energy from Russia, and that can save the situation. Also, we can procure coal from Russia, unfortunately for currency, but anyways, it will be cheaper. Look, we use coal or gas or mazout, all of those. That's from abroad, and we have to pay with currency. And the efficiency from coal is the highest.
Ми дійсно
the
будемо
least,
купувати в державних підприємств,
and
в тому числі, які
it's the cheapest fuel.
вугілля на
And
тимчасово
yes, we will
окупованій території,
procure from
контролем
state
того,
enterprises
що ці
that
гроші
produce
на
coal
заробітну плату
on
шахтарям
temporary occupied territories, and will control that that money is used only for salary of miners and who are citizens of Ukraine. There will be no currency because the coal will be provided directly to power stations, and other suppliers of coal, as far as I'm informed, will not have them, and will stop smuggling of coal. As to providing power supplies to Crimea, I don't know about that, but if we have electric power, they will have it. If we don't have it, of course they will not have it. It's not politics. We had switch-offs all the time in Crimea because we didn't have electric power. It's very easy to explain. Channel 5. One more point. Nobody gave state guarantees, and we cannot give guarantees to Crimea. And a question from our soldiers in the east, there will be was when you told that a soldier should receive 1,000 hryvnia a day. Now they are fighting for 5,000. And did they understand you correctly? Did they understand you correctly? What is the adequate salary for a soldier in the east? The adequate should be very high. The adequate salary. I emphasized it's for those who are in the battle, and it should be paid for every day in the battle, not in ATO. These are different approaches. There was also a different model was chosen. To everyone who's in ATO, they received a raise. During the campaign, I told a sniper from special forces in Kirovarad. He told that he was receiving 600 hryvnia a day as a mobilized person. How much is he making now? 8,000. Not 5, not 4, and not 3 as you told, but 8,000. I have his phone number, and I know that this is the level he receives at present. 14 times more. Is it enough? No. But is it a raise in 14 times? Is it a big change? Yes. And the sniper has now warm clothing. He has new sniper's rifle, not SVD. He has a backpack, collimator, and all the rest that he hadn't before, and it's just in half a year. Is it a difference? This is my answer to you. And also, we have more than 80 billion hryvnia. When the state limiting itself and everything, we prepared the new budget, and it was voted yesterday, defense and security budget, and it allows to improve and to give raise to those who are in ATO, including there could be proposals to provide to finance battles. If there is a battle, you should give an additional raise to your salary. Громадське ТВ.
Отже, презентуючи вашу стратегію до 2020 року, ви наголосили, що саме проведення реформи судової системи є для вас пріоритетом.
Presenting your strategy 2020, you emphasized that the judicial reform is a priority for you. But I'm talking about your draft law 1656. The president, besides appointing the judges to courts, will get or will receive the rights to liquidate courts to sign certificates of judges and also to receive the oath from the judges. And in other words, the career of every judge depends on the president and presidential administration. But there is a draft law 1597, which was drafted by RPR experts.
Перше, цей законопроект підготовлений Радою судової реформи.
So how do you differ from Yanukovych in relation to judiciary, Mr. President? This draft law was drafted by the Council of Judicial Reform, was submitted to me for signature and has the same status as the draft law prepared by the experts from the RPR. This draft will be discussed at the Parliament, and at the stage of the second reading, the compromise could be found. That draft does not increase, does not diminish the powers of the President. The President appoints the judges for 5 years. The President receives the oath of judges, and that is according to the Constitution. And you are not the Constitutional Court to claim different. You are at the press conference of the President, and you are stating certain things which have no confirmation. This draft narrows the powers of the President, because now the President moves a judge from one court to another one. In my draft, it's the opposite. We will organize an transparent competition with participation of community. Now there's a vacancy, and now by an order I can move a judge from one position to this vacancy. Without any procedure I can do it. The draft which was submitted by the Council of Judges and which was submitted by me limits the powers of the President. If someone wants to push own draft, for that you do not need to criticize so much the council's draft, and for that, well, they shouldn't be sending just SMS to you so that you can read this question, because the draft law is entitled "The Right for Fair Court," and this should have several reasons, from 2 to 9 grounds to make the judge responsible. Who will do that? The President? No. The highest qualification commission of the judges. More grounds to dismiss the judge, especially when it comes to cases when they are allowing the criminals to run away from the country, or they allow the assets of the criminals to fly away from the country. If you want to work, please, I invite you to the Council of Reforms, to the Council of the experts, but the laws are to be passed. I will not be waiting. In the middle of January, I will submit the draft on limiting the judiciary immunity, and again, some people will not like it. But my request is, if you believe that there are certain things, talk to the Constitutional Court, and you will see that that does not correspond to the reality. If you want to be the partner in judicial reform, you're welcome, do that. And if you say that we are trying to do something for information, I appoint judges today. I can move a judge from one position to another without any transparent procedures. And I want to make this activity much more transparent. So now you need to meet with the RPR.
Попросити журналіста, щоб він задав прислане на
RPR. They have to conduct discussion, but not to request the journalist to ask a question by SMS.
в агрессии России против Украины? Российские власти или россияне, которые их поголовно поддерживают?
RBK Ukraine. Are these Russian authorities or Russians who support Russian authorities waging the war against Ukraine?
дуже безвідповідальний крок, коли розв'язала цю агресію. Я думаю, що
I believe that Russia
Україна платить безмежну ціну
started the aggression. And Russia, Ukraine is paying a very high value, a very high cost for this aggression. But Russia also has to pay a high price for this irresponsibility. I don't think this is an objective information that all Russians support the authorities. There is a certain transformation in Russia in how Russians treat the war against Ukraine. After Crimea, there was a lot of enthusiasm, but when they start receiving the cargo 200, when the parents of those soldiers who were killed do not understand what were they doing here, then the level of support goes down. And if you ask Russians, and you will see the data of sociological surveys, are they ready to go and fight to Ukraine? You will be impressed by how low the support is. I believe that now they are getting sober, and that's a very good process. Ukrainian news. I have a question. How often do you communicate to Russian president on the phone? On the 15th of January, you'll be meeting with him in Astana, and the country saw how you were shaking hand of Putin in Minsk, but then the country saw you were smiling together with Mr. Lukashenko and Nazarbayev, despite the fact that they recognize that Crimea is Russian territory. Was this limit of allowed by diplomatic policy and dignity? Ukraine respects itself and will respect itself. There's no question about that. Please excuse me, but I will try to correct your information. Mr. Lukashenko, Mr. Nazarbayev, they have never recognized neither Russian sovereignty over Crimea nor the elections in Donetsk and Lugansk regions on the 2nd of November. That is absolutely position of the principle of both leaders of these countries. And that is the result of intensive diplomatic contacts. During the visit on the territory of Ukraine and Kiev, both of them stated that the sovereignty, the territorial integrity of the country, territorial integrity means that all the territories which are occupied, they are the territories of Ukraine. And that was stated by both Nazarbayev and Lukashenko, and that diplomatic work allows to consolidate the level of diplomatic support in the world. Kazakhstan will start supplying coal to us. We renewed the military technical cooperation with Kazakhstan and also with Belarus. In this situation, Russia is on its own, and it's worth having these negotiations. And it's worth getting their support. For that, we will have to have the summit in Astana. But that's not the meeting of the customs union like they were planning to have it in Minsk. This will be Normandy format, and I will be communicating there with Putin like I was doing it in Milan and in Minsk to ensure that Russia observes the commitments taken according to the protocol. And I would like to emphasize that these diplomatic efforts, they save lives of our soldiers. That's the only way we can do that. How we can reintegrate these territories to Ukraine. There will be no compromise in issue of territorial integrity that cannot be measured by handshake or by money. Ukraine is not for sale. For me, that is the position of principle, and that is true not only about Donbass, but Crimea. And that is why Mustafa Dzhemilev and Rifat Chubarov became the member of the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and Mustafa Dzhemilev is my advisor. So please, my request is, please verify the information. We've been working for 2 hours, 22 questions were asked. Now, let's have 2-3 more questions. Denis Kazansky, Ukrainian Weekly. We continue to supply gas to the occupied territories where occupational administration has to be taking care of that. Do you believe that we need to probably exchange gas in Donbass for coal? And if they do not give us coal, maybe we need to limit the supply of electricity and gas to Donbass. Will Donbass be recognized as an occupied territory? Because there's no law about Donbass like about Crimea. Donbass is an occupied territory. Ukrainians live in Donbass.
Перекриємо електроенергію, перекриємо газ і будемо, нехай вони там мерзнуть або щось там інше.
Someone would like if we say we will shut off the electricity and the gas and let them get cold. Let whatever happen to them, let they have a humanitarian and environmental catastrophe. But these are Ukrainians, and we cannot let them freeze. We are civilized Ukraine. That's not just the position of Ukraine, but the position of the whole civilized world, which values such behavior of Ukraine, which is so different from the behavior of the aggressor and occupant.
Не газ, а вугілля. Ми будемо постачати
We have state-owned mines. We'll be buying coal from them.
Невиплачені пенсії, які сьогодні компенсують видатки на газ і електроенергію.
We have the money to pay for that. We have the pensions which are not paid. I'm sure that we can return the Donbass not if
Чому ви завчасно не отримали
stopping the supply
дозвіл
of gas.
від Міністерства культури для вашого будівництва в буферній зоні
Radio Liberty. Why have not you received
Це
the
Міністерство культури каже,
permit
а
from the
колишній працівник. Я не маю жодного
Ministry of
відношення до того, щоб
Culture?
отримувати чи не отримати дозволи. Бо це має
That
робити
wasn't the
будівельна
Ministry of
компанія.
Culture that is saying
І
it.
будівельна компанія наступного дня
I have
провела
nothing to
прес-конференцію.
to
Показали
do
всі
with
дозволи,
getting or
які
not
були
getting the
отримані ще в
permit, because
12-му,
that is the
14-му
construction
роках.
company that
А
has to do
журналіст
it,
просто
and the construction company
не було
next
не
day,
цікаво це. Дякую.
they showed all the permits
Давайте,
that
пропоную
they
останнє
received
запитання.
in 2012,
Але
2014,
це
and
ще
the
раз,
journalist
дивіться, я
wasn't
думаю, що це дуже
interested
добрий
in
знак.
that.
Це ще раз означає, що президент має бути абсолютно відкритим. І
Unyan.
тричі
But again,
перевіряти позицію. І ці
this is a very
відрізняються
good
в кращий
sign.
бік.
That means that the president has
Ключова
to be
позиція була не в
absolutely
тому, чи
open.
отримав, чи не отримав дозвіл. Ключова позиція, дорогенька моя, була в тому, чи порушує
And
президент
this
закон,
way,
чи
the
ні.
president should
Для мене
differ
тут
from
принципова
average
Президент закон
every
має
citizen. An important
Тому
thing
я
was
маю
whether
звітувати,
they
відповідати
received the
на
permit or not, but it was important
а чи
whether
було там
the
будівництво?
president is violating the law or not. The
А що ж
president
там
cannot
робилося?
violate the
Був
law,
припис побудувати,
and I have to
е,
report to every request.
стінку проти суву, бо,
Will there be
була
any
аварія.
construction? Was
А,
there any
яка була
construction?
аварія?
No.
А
What
знайшли
was there?
боєприпаси Другої світової
There was an
війни, і звідти
instruction
воно
to
все
build.
почалося зсуватися. Ну, це журналісту не цікаво. Цікаво було
Something
створення
because
іміджу
there was
такого,
an
знаєте,
accident.
а
They
порушує
found
президент закон чи ні?
the
Не порушує.
ammunition from the Second World War.
Петро Олексійович,
But
маю
that
до вас питання
is
про
how
сучасні
it
мафії.
started,
Ми
about whether
знаємо,
the
що вже працює
president
більше
violates the
півроку спеціальна комісія, яка
law or not.
рекомендувала
No,
вже
I
декілька,
don't
навіть
violate
десяток,
the
здається,
law.
суддів, які переслідують
The question about the
журналістів,
mafia of judges, we know that the special commission is now working, which recommended
Знаємо, що
to
голова
dismiss
апеляційного
about
суду
dozen of
Києва,
judges.
набрався нахабності і сказав, що він не виконуватиме закон про люстрацію.
And these cases are sitting on shelves. We know that the head of the Court of
Буде проводити
Appeal
свою власну люстрацію лише влітку. Власне,
promised
на вашу
that
думку, чи немає
this will
саботажу?
be
І,
cancelled
знаєте, що
and the
робити суддівській мафії,
Constitutional
оскільки ми
Court,
бачимо, жоден суддя не те, що не
they
покараний
will
за
be
Майдан і
doing
за
their
інші
own
речі. А
lustration.
навіть,
But
просто
all these
відкривали
cases are
зарплату
sitting
перед
on
вільною
shelves.
пенсією.
Ви абсолютно
What
праві.
to
Я
do
вас
with the mafia of
У мене
judges?
отут
A single
знаєте,
judge was
перегортається.
punished
Таким же чином це все
for the
відбувається.
events at
Виявляється, у нас не
Maidan. They
діяла
were
Вища
not even
кваліфікаційна
deprived of
комісія.
their status.
І була
You
запущена
know,
лише
in there,
якщо
everything
помиляюсь,
turns
лише тиждень
over.
тому.
How
Першим
is
її
that
рішенням
happening?
було притягнення до
Our
відповідальності
highest
від
qualification
Верховного
commission
Адміністративного
wasn't
суду,
operating
суду, який виступив садовник.
and started working only 3 weeks
Друге
ago.
буде.
Its first solution was to dismiss the judge of Pichet's court. The second will be to make responsible the judge who levied the arrest from the assets of Klimenko or Arbuzov. But the judges have to know that they will be responsible for such solutions. And the law that our colleague has mentioned or read about from SMS, according to this law, the highest council of justice is to be formed. And only such council can make such decisions. It will be depoliticized, it should be trusted, it should work fast. So I will not allow the situation when, because of some accusations, we delay considering such cases.
Не зробимо цього.
But
Марне створення антикорупційного бюро,
we
марне
will be
переформатування Генеральної прокуратури,
trying
марне
to
перезапуск
free our judicial system from such pseudo judges, because otherwise there's no sense in starting this anti-corruption bureau in the security service of Ukraine. But
І саме тому я сподіваюся, що
we
цей законопроект законопроект буде прийнятий в
need
першому
to
читанні,
have an
через
independent
2 тижні
judiciary
в
which
цілому
will make corruptionists,
і реалізуємо право українців
criminals
на
responsible, and I hope that this draft law will be passed in the
Дякуємо.
first reading,
Пропозиція завершити прес-конференцію.
and
Встигли
then
відповісти
we'll
на
be
25
able to
запитань.
Спасибі.
implement the right of Ukrainians to have a fair court. We answered 25 questions. Thank you. Thank you.